So welcome to the AFT Construction Podcast. I'm Brad Levitt, and today we're super fortunate to welcome Willie Bloomquist with us. Welcome, Willie.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so Willie, for those of you that recognize that name, former Major League Baseball star, you played at ASU, you have roots here, at least with us, even though you're not from Arizona, but I know you work out with the Diamondbacks, and we were talking about how you're the special assistant to Derek Hall, but you took a volunteer furlough just because of COVID and everything else, and it's allowed you to pursue the entrepreneurship that you're doing, which is really fun, after your professional career. So I guess, Willie, to start this, one of my questions for you is, you had a very versatile career, right, in the major leagues, being one of only 6 players to start 40 games in all the infield and outfield positions, so what do you feel contributed to that success, being able to play and learn so many different positions, as far as your baseball career?
Well, I think it was just, growing up, playing a variety of sports, develop some different athletic tools, I guess, to have in your bag. And then, I'd always been kind of a shortstop and a pitcher, like everybody in high school. But then got to ASU, and guys are pretty good there. So, I had to adjust, and I just kind of wanted to just play. I wanted to be out in the field and play somewhere, and we had some pretty good players there. And I think it ultimately, the mindset of who I played for, Pat Murphy at the time, the mindset of just doing whatever it takes for your team to help your team win. And for me, being a part of on the field somewhere, I didn't care where. And so, my first year I bounced around as a freshman. And then my sophomore year, I played a significant amount of left field, and that's kind of when I learned how to play the outfield, and a little bit of second base. And then my junior year played shortstop. So, it started kind of in college where I was bouncing around a little bit. And then, when I kind of got into professional baseball, and started making my way up the ranks as a second baseman, I got to the big leagues, or was on the doorstep of going to the big leagues, and had a guy named Brett Boone at second base, who the year before had 36 homers and 160 RBIs. Like, man, I can't compete with that. So, I was forced to the decision, sit behind Booney for 3 or 4 more years, or learn how to play other positions and, try to break in the big leagues that way. So, obviously I chose the latter, and that was ultimately a smart decision.
Well, I think what's fascinating, there's so many analogies, when you think about sports and business, right? Because I think a lot of people from afar, you look at, maybe a successful business and you're like, oh, it just came easy, or it just kind of happens, but you don't realize the work behind the scenes. And I think the same thing with athletics. I play sports, not at your level, of course, Willie, but you think about, okay, well, Willie's just talented, but they don't realize, yeah, you may be talented and I'll get you so far maybe in high school, but then you get to ASU, a very talented school, you get to major leagues, and now, there's a lot of work and dedication behind the scenes. And so speak to that, just the amount of time that goes into perfecting that craft, and especially for you to learn different positions, because most people specialize, and here you are now playing all these positions, learning the different angles, to when you're on the defense, in the outfield and in the infield. And so, talk to just the work that goes in behind the scenes that people just don't see.
Well, I mean, that's, I'm glad you touched on that, because that's, if there was one thing that I guess I'm proud of about myself, it's the fact the amount of hours and work that I put in behind the scenes. And, talent wise, look, I wasn't very talented as far as, once you get to that certain level of major league caliber talent. I wasn't the most talented guy, never will be, never claimed to be. But what I will claim to be is not outworked. Nobody's going to outwork me. And that's, if I'm going to not be good enough, that's fine, but I'm not going to leave it to chance based on that I didn't work hard enough to give myself every opportunity. And for me, that was kind of my mindset going in. It was instilled in me at a very young age from my parents and my coaches that I had growing up, that hard work really doesn't guarantee you success, but without it, you don't have a chance. So for me, that was, going into it, that was kind of my mindset on things. And look, I had to get better at a lot of things. There was not an easy path for me to just go and show up and throw my uniform on and run out there and be a superstar. I had to grind. I had to work extra hard in order to even compete with those guys. And I knew the minute that I stopped working hard was the day that I might as well take my spikes off, because I can't compete with it, with those guys without hard work. So And then the variety of position thing, that's just one position, and I had to try to play 6 or 7 of them. So you put the hours in it at shortstop, for example, and once you kind of start fine tuning yourself to a point where, okay, you're at the caliber, possibly a major league level there, you got to bounce and relearn it backwards over at second base and learn how to turn a double play there. And then you got to go to third base and learn how to be, a guy that can then fill in at that spot. And, and you have to swallow your ego and your pride a little bit in the fact of knowing that, look, these guys are playing one position and they're getting really good at it. That's just not your role right now. If you had an ego at the point where you I just want to play one position and see how good I can get there, for a guy like me, that's not going to work. I'm not good enough. I got to be able to play a variety of them. So it became a challenge to continue working at those other positions. And for me, I ended up embracing it after a while, to where it was kind of fun coming to the yard, seeing where I was going to play today. And that kind of became a niche for me and a fun thing for me to do.
I love that because, I think about business and you think about businesses that succeed right now with COVID, you're dealing with all these different changes and nuances, right? With stores closing and every state's different, every governor's different. And so how are we versatile as a company? How are we honing in on what can make us successful no matter the industry? And the application for you is that, the hard work behind the scenes, all the preparation and all the time, because what I still have a hard time understanding, what people don't realize, if depending on if you're playing the shift and if you're in second base, it's a whole different position and where you need to be to turn that double play as opposed to third base and shortstop. And then in the outfield, the angles if you're in right field and left field. And so, I don't think people realize the amount of time it takes for someone such as yourself behind the scenes, the time they're putting in, and just like business, right? And how does that set you up, I guess, from a business side? Now you're doing entrepreneurship and just the ability to not so much work on the fly, but prepare yourself because you've done the work, like you understand the relationship side, the hard work, and now you can put all that together.
Well, Lou Piniella told me once, and I'll never forget it. It was that no truer line had been spoken: is be comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And especially with a guy in your role, you never know what's going to be thrown at you. You just got to learn how to be comfortable with it, because you're never going to actually feel warm and fuzzy and cozy. And I think you can take that into any industry or any world or any walk of life, is you really never know what's going to be thrown at you, but all you can do is prepare yourself the best you can to be able to deal with different elements and different variables that are thrown at you on any particular time. Obviously, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Who would have ever thought this, right? But not saying anyone could plan for this and be ready for it, but you can be ready for change on the fly. If something goes haywire, how am I going to adjust and succeed? And smart people and people that are able to adapt are the ones that they're able to survive. So, in the business world. So it's the environment right now is very tricky, obviously, when it comes to so many different lines of work. But, ultimately those that don't panic, reevaluate, where can we go and how can we stay successful as a business and as a person. So, those are the keys kind of in any walk of life.
I love that you said that because, for anyone that's an entrepreneur, it's funny because, there's an article I read and it says it changes whether you're up or down, and it could depend every 5 minutes of the day, right? Because the setbacks, the challenges, which is very applicable to your entire career, right? There's the ups and downs, and you mentioned be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I think that positive mindset, having the ability to understand the highs and lows, how to work through that and understand that there is a solution, that positivity, that's what makes you successful. So I guess, Willie, before diving into some of the business side that you're doing, going back to that, you also, played quarterback in high school, you won the state championship. And so what made that end decision for you to say, do I want to stick with football? I'm a talented QB. Do I want to go the baseball route? Was there a different passion, love? Because I think you have to have passion behind you if you're going to be successful. So, what kind of navigated, I guess, that decision for you?
Yeah, well, I'm 5'10" and 170 pounds.
That doesn't matter today, though, but back then, probably, right?
Well, those boys with put the pads on get pretty big, and truth be told, I think I have more of a football player's mentality, I guess, because I loved football. I love the game of football. At the end of the day, I just knew I was better at baseball, even though I probably actually liked football more. I was better at baseball and knew that if I was ever going to go play and be a significant factor in college, that was the route I was probably going to need to go. Like I said, size was a factor. As far as if I were to have gone football, I probably would have been somewhere, maybe in the Big Sky or somewhere in that type of conference, or maybe NAIA or something. I wouldn't have been a big time football player. And for me at the time, I knew I had an opportunity to play Division I and possibly Pac-12 or whatever, Pac-10 at the time, in baseball, and that enticed me. That kind of got my juices flowing, and then had the opportunity to when I started getting looked at from a professional standpoint in high school. I didn't know how good I was, at that time. I mean, and I had scouts talking to me and saying I was going to possibly be drafted and that type of stuff. So I figured, shoot, maybe I am okay at this sport, and this is probably the sport I should choose. If people are looking at me from making a profession and living out of it. So chose that route, and obviously I think it turned out okay.
So what's fascinating to me is when you speak about college athletics, right now, they always talk about, the student athlete, which in reality, with the dollars behind it and the commitment from you as an athlete in college, it's a huge commitment. And I know going through college, how difficult it was just being a student, right? And getting through, and then a student athlete where you're traveling and you're on the road, in life, to be successful, you have to be able to multitask. You have to be able to prioritize your schedule, and understand what's important to work on as a business owner. So, I mean, how do you even do that in college when you're playing at that level, ASU, and you're putting in the time in the film room and the practice facilities and training, and then still focusing on school? I mean, how did you even balance, that part of your career, and how did that prepare you, I guess, for your future?
Well, I think that's something you have to learn. You have to learn to do. Otherwise, you end up becoming just kind of a mess, really. If you try to be all things to all people, that'll never work. Murph told us when we got to ASU, you can have a baseball career, an academic career, and a social life. You got to pick two of the three, because you can't do all three. And he said, you better pick baseball because you're here to play baseball, and you better have an academic life, because if you're not eligible, you don't get to play baseball. So if you want to try to mix in a personal life and a social life, you can't do all three. There's not enough hours in the day. So you got to prioritize what's important. And I'm not going to lie, as a freshman, I thought I could do all three. And try to experience college a little bit and go out and have fun. And man, you show up for a morning workout and you're dragging, and you just can't. I learned really quick that he was right. You can't manage all three. You have to prioritize what's important. And ultimately that's what you decide to do. If you want to be great at something, you got to dedicate yourself to it. And if you let the other distractions or factors come into it that deter you away from being great, then that's your own fault. And for me, that was just kind of a mindset that I had when I made the decision. I wanted to go to ASU and play there, and win a national championship, or attempt to win a national championship. You had to do things that other people weren't doing. And a lot of time that takes sacrificing what is fun in order to do what you need to do to become better at your craft. So again, back to kind of prioritizing what's important and what you need to do in order to be successful.
I love that you used the word fun, that sometimes you have to sacrifice fun. And that's the hard part, right? I think to be successful in the industry, and especially in athletics, there's the fun part, which all of us, probably more catered to as human beings, is pretty natural. But to be able to put that off and have the discipline to focus on your craft and focus on your business, or focus on your athleticism, right, and training is so key. And, for you with your career, especially when you entered the big leagues, and, as, social media has completely changed. It became very prevalent when you're in the big leagues, and now even more so. How did you see, how did that make an impact, I guess, in your life and some of the athletes' life, with just the access to, local media, to local fans, and the fan base? I mean, how did that change that whole dynamic with social media, in your career?
Well, when I played, I didn't really like to look at that stuff, because you hit the nail on the head. People have access to you to say whatever they want,
Right.
and a lot of times it's pretty harsh. A lot of times it's in good fun, but you know they don't have to. They aren't held accountable for anything they say. But if you as an athlete fire back at something, you're held to a completely different standard, and it's blasted all over ESPN or whoever it is. Not saying me personally, but a lot of these guys that are much bigger names, it follows you forever, and you can't get away from it. It's different than somebody sitting behind in their mom's basement, saying a hateful toward you or whatever. So you have to learn to navigate that accurately, and to be honest, it's very difficult to get your point across in words and in text, to throw something out there on Twitter or whatever. So I don't do a whole lot on that. When I do, sometimes I get myself in trouble because I don't say what I actually mean to say. But it's one of those things that you're never going to please everybody on that. However, it can be used as a good tool for awareness. And doing things that you try to do good, for people, as far as maybe doing a charity event or whatever to get the word out, or and some guys are really good at getting their point across in text. I'm not one of those guys, but for me, I'm more of an Instagram type of person where I like to be able to put the picture along with it and be able to describe what we're doing here. That's kind of more me, I guess. But social media is definitely, a lot of these guys are pros at it, where they brand themselves and be able to throw themselves out there and want to portray a certain image. And they're masters of being able to do that. I wasn't. I didn't like it. When people start, getting dirty on Twitter or something, I'd want to fight back,
Yeah.
and
Right.
that's just my mentality. I just want to, I'll respond to this guy, but then you got to respond to that one and that one and that one, and it overwhelms you. So you just got to learn that you can't fight the world on that stuff. You just use it for what it is, throw it out there, and be done with it.
See, I always wonder, just the thick skin, if you will, or challenge of being an athlete, because I look at social media. I mean, for us, it's pretty easy in the sense that, as a business owner, we're showing these beautiful construction projects, progress, these beautiful commercial residential. And for most people, like, they gravitate towards it, right? They like it. And occasionally we get some trolls or some bad comments. I had someone that reached out and they're like, Brad, in a recession, you must feel really guilty, posting these homes on the top 1%. And I turned it into, there's ways to turn that into positive, where it's like, well, instead of going after this troll, I just did a video and said, look, we're grateful for the people that are willing to invest in their home and their lifestyle, because that employs, in construction, that's pretty unique. And it employs designers and architects and engineers and, painters and drywallers. I mean, so many people are impacted in their families by someone investing, but it's different as an athlete because, as you mentioned, people can hide behind their screen. They have a confidence that they wouldn't have if they're meeting you in the bar of the street, Willie, right, or somewhere else in public. They're not going to say a lot of the stuff they're going to say behind the scenes. And so I guess, how do you navigate just the mentality to stay positive and not let that get you down, especially in baseball? That's probably more of a mental sport than the others, where you're at the plate and you're thinking about the pitch, and, you can go through slumps. It's such a different sport. And so it's hard. And I think it was Derek Jeter, right, if I'm not mistaken. He always said, I don't hang around negative people. I always hang around positive people, because in my profession, like, it has to be positive all the time.
Right. And like I said, that's why I chose not to. I don't even know why I had a dang Twitter account when I did play. Because I was one of those type that bothered me, when people would say stuff and I would think about it. That's why, and again, this is the evolution of kind of the athletic world. Is when I first cracked into the big leagues, we didn't have Twitter. We didn't have that type of stuff. We had the Seattle Times, we had the local newspapers, and that was
Normal
it.
beat writer, yeah.
And then as kind of toward the end or latter part of my career is kind of when the Twitter stuff started coming out. But I would see guys that would laugh at what people would say back to them, when they're ripping on them or whatever, and they'd laugh and say back, and I'm like, man, I don't laugh at that stuff. I get pissed off at it. So for me, it was probably better that I just stayed away from it. And that's why I chose not to really read anything when I did play, because I knew it would affect me. Now that I'm done, I don't really care so much anymore. But, when I did, I was so had to be so mentally sharp in order to compete at that level. I couldn't afford to have any other distractions. And for me, that was kind of along the lines of what Jeter said. You try to be around positive people, and it's a game of failure. Baseball's a game of failure. You failed 7 out of 10 times, you're doing pretty good. You don't need people piling on when you do fail. And believe me, I failed a lot. So I probably failed more than most, but you had to try to remain positive and try to grind through it, and surround yourself with good people that care about you and care about your well-being and your career.
I love that you said that. I mean, you talk about failure, and it's funny. There's an architect, Mark Candelaria, who's here local, and he was on my podcast at the very beginning. And one thing he said constantly, and he always says this when I'm around him, he says, don't focus on your failures, because most people forget about that, right? They look at your successes, and a lot of times we internalize our failures and we think about that too much, and it impacts our day to day. Where we need to focus on the positive stuff. And I've seen them in my career, especially as being a business owner, that the more positive people I'm around, and the more people that are ambitious and looking to succeed, right? That's who you want to build that culture around. You want to be around them. And, I guess, from your side, Willie, being an athlete, I mean, how, when you're an athlete, you're almost your own enterprise, right? I mean, you're not doing your own taxes, but I mean, people don't realize when you're playing in other states, you're filing different tax returns for all the states you play. And, in addition to your home state, and then you're trying to manage, the finances and life and contracts and all this stuff. And so, did you have any training or, understanding of how to, set up budgets and living expenses, especially knowing that your career is only going to be so long? I mean, it's very applicable to business that we're forecasting and trying to understand, margins this year and how we're building our company for the future and putting the right cash back in the company so that we're strong and can be there for our clients. So I guess, did you learn on the fly? Did you have training with that? And how has that impacted, I guess, your business career?
Right. Well, real quick before I touch on that, is getting back to the failure thing. I think one thing that it's important to learn on surrounding yourself with positive people, and you can't really look at failure as a negative thing. And those that can master that have a much better chance at being successful. You have to look at it failing at something as a positive, if that makes sense, because that lets you know what you need to work on to become better. And for me, that was a big thing. Is when you fail at something, instead of dwelling on it and beating yourself up over, which I had a tendency to do from time to time, is you have to look at it. Okay, that's only going to sharpen me up for later. That's what I have to work on to become more successful, whether it's at business or whether it's on the athletic field. So I think when you can train your mind to view failure as more of a positive, it ultimately will help you in the long run.
And I love you said that, if I interrupt you real quick, Willie, because, Dave, who's a mutual friend of ours that actually introduced us, Dave's been a mentor of mine, and he always says, as you mentioned, challenges are opportunities to succeed, right? And you talked about that if you look at failures as, hey, this is a chance for growth, it's a chance to reevaluate where I'm at, in my life and what I need to do, you can utilize that and build off that, which is going to help the trajectory of your career and your life, in a positive way.
Right. And I think that's, again, when you do fail, because it's inevitable, rather than having, like you call them, the trolls or whoever on Twitter burying and piling on, you got to have people around you like, okay, now we know what we got to work on, and use it as a positive and help you sharpen it up for down the road. And it's only going to make you more of a complete player or a complete, business owner or whatever it is. And so I think that's important to try to train your mind to think that way. But to answer your question on kind of budgeting and learning on that type of stuff, that's the unique thing about baseball players or athletes in general, is that you don't know how long your career is going to be. I mean, you're one blown out knee away from never playing again. Obviously there's some guys that make a whole heck of a lot more money than the rest of us and make millions and millions. But for me, I knew I was really never that type of player. I was going to have to be smart about the money that I made. When you're done playing, that in a perfect world, that money's got to carry you the rest of your life. So you have to kind of be smart about and not take the carrot, if you will, to go out and buy a new car every chance you get, or going out and getting nice things that you normally would and at the time can afford. you have to budget and be smart. And, I have 4 daughters. I have to budget for them and a wife. So, I definitely have to be ultra sensitive when it comes to budgeting and understanding that, they're going to cost me some money down the road, on some things. But, how I learned that, I think, from an age of being fortunate, being, my parents raised me in a way to be smart about that type of stuff. And then obviously having some mentors, when I did get to the major leagues and started making a little bit of money, that, some older veteran players that, took me under their wing and said, hey, one paycheck goes to your investment guy and the other one goes to your house payments, and get that type, the goal is when you're done playing, have your house paid off so you don't owe anybody anything. Then everything's just free and clear. And for me, that was at the time, and still was probably a very smart decision that we decided to make. That was to, get everything paid off. So when my career is over, that I'm not in debt, to anybody, free and clear, and can move on and then live within your means from then on out.
I love that. And there's so much, it's very applicable to us in businesses, right? Because especially in, I apply it to my market, construction, architecture, real estate, design, right? Is that there's these ebbs and flows. And we all know that, yeah, it's been busy for the last couple of years. Interest rates are low. A lot of people are investing. A lot of people are moving, relocating because of COVID. And especially in Arizona, we're hitting this, a lot of people are moving here because they want to get out of other states that are more confined or restrictive or tax heavy. And so, but it's important to understand the slow times, the rainy days that will be coming, and how do we prepare as a business, that we're not just cashing out, that we're putting a nest egg in there as we think about our employees and their families and, our clients, and to make sure you're here for the long run. And what's amazing, I love that you shared, Willie, you talked about mentors, because, for any business, or anyone in their career, like if you have mentors that are going to give you some good advice that have been through it, then you don't have to make that failure on your own, right? You can learn through them and through their wisdom. And what I love that you did, and maybe this goes back to just the balance you had in college at ASU and just your lifestyle, but you did a lot of work with the, Phoenix Children's Hospital, giving back. And so what inspired you, to get involved with Phoenix Children's Hospital and the charity aspect, and spend some of your free time, in that realm?
Well, for me, I was at a point in my career when I started getting more involved with, wanting to do something for kids. I think I'd been in the big leagues 8 years. And for me, it was just more of I was just trying to survive in the major leagues. Give me one more year type thing. And I had been, I think, in there 8 years, and I was at the point in my career where, starting to get a little bit older, and I got an opportunity to come back here to Arizona, and play for the Diamondbacks. And, I'm like, man, I've been pretty blessed, with things that have been given to me in my life. I've got an opportunity to play in Seattle, the hometown that I grew up in. And now I'm getting an opportunity to play in my second hometown here in Arizona. And for me, I just wanted to do something. I'm like, I haven't made an impact, with anybody or anything. And I've been in the major leagues 8 years. I haven't used, this platform that I've been given to do anything, really. And it's time to do something and make an impact, or try to at least make an impact and help somebody's, help out in some way, shape, or form. My wife and I are passionate about kids. We like kids, and that in our military, are kind of the two things that I have a soft spot for, that I like to try to help out when I can. And that was just one thing that there's a lot of people out there that have been dealt tough hands, and it's not fair. There's a lot of areas in life where life isn't fair to people, and especially the kids. You see these poor kids that are fighting cancer, or fighting, a disease that's life threatening, and they did nothing to deserve this. And here we are that get to live, fortunate and do some things that we get to go out and play baseball for a living. So for me, it was one of those times in my life where I'm like, it's time to give back, help out these kids, and do something where I can give back to them. And selfishly, I feel better about myself, because I do that. And so my wife and I decided to create a foundation down at the Phoenix Children's Hospital, in order to help out down there. And it was, through my years at Arizona was a success, and we did something that we set out to do. But that kind of laid the groundwork for wanting to give back, and from a charitable standpoint. Like I said, just the way it makes you feel when you help somebody else out unsolicited, and you just do it because you want to do it. Makes you feel pretty dang good inside, knowing that you help somebody out and create some great friendships, and give them an understanding that we're all in this together. We're all trying to make the world a better place, or at least most of us are. We're trying to make the world a better place, and we understand that there's people that have been dealt really tough hands, that if you can help out, it's not your job to help out, but it's why are we on this earth, to make it a better place and to help people out when you can and are able to. So that's just kind of laid the foundation of what we do, and now moving into the business world, we still try to do that, where we give back to certain causes.
I love that you do that, because you think about what's your mark, what's your impact. And, especially when I was doing more research and preparation to speak to you, Will, I mean, not only was I fascinated, and we spoke about this, just the versatility of your career. I mean, I don't think people realize how difficult it is to master so many positions and play it at the level that you did, which is just absolutely incredible. That's why there's only 6 players that have done it, right? But going to the charitable aspect, that to me really stuck out, because one of the early mentors in my career, I mean, he lived by this saying that I've remembered for the rest of my life. And I've said this before, but it's generosity precedes prosperity. And it's not just the financial thing, but I think as a person, the more good that you're putting out there, the more you're serving, whether it be the military or children, or people that have had a tough lot in life, because it does happen. Not everyone's dealt the same hand, right? And the same cards. And so the more that you are impacting others and being a mentor and reaching out and utilizing, your platform for good, it just builds what you're doing, right? There's so many, I'm sure you've seen so many things that have been uplifting to you and your wife and children, and a great example to them as a father, where you're giving back. And I'm sure you've seen benefits, not from a financial side, but just life happiness, right, from doing that.
Well, I think, having zero to do with from a financial standpoint, but I think the amount of gratification you get from helping somebody that didn't ask for help, you just wanted to go help someone just because. You can't put a price tag on it in my mind. We've tried to instill that to our kids as well, to where, especially around the holidays, we create, gift boxes and just give to people, and they question, why are we doing this? It's like, well, just do it and then go give it to somebody and you'll see why. And then once you see the impact that you had, whether it's small or big or whatever, you can't put a price tag on the internal feeling you have when you help influence someone's life for the positive. And for me, that's kind of what it's about. When you give back and you do some charitable stuff, because it's like I said, that the impact you have on somebody when it's unsolicited, to me, is it's the ultimate pinnacle. If you can do it, do it. There's a lot of people that need help and on certain walks of life, and rather than being behind your keyboard and hating on people, try going out and loving on somebody.
There's
Try going
somebody.
out helping somebody out, here and there. It actually makes you feel pretty good inside.
Yeah, I love that, because, one of my other thing that, a mentor taught me, he said, we judge other people on their actions and we judge ourselves on our intentions, right? And so you think about that, especially now, without getting political, I mean, we're in this political climate where there's so much finger pointing and everyone's so angry, and, they have their sides, they're not budging. But you think about, if we went out and learned a little bit more about other cultures, other people, serve them, spend time giving back. I mean, the unity that comes from that, and just the instruction you're giving your children, especially, is huge to me. I have 6 kids, 5 daughters. So I understand, what it's like having daughters and trying to teach them and help our kids understand just some of the benefits they have living here in America that's different than other countries, But I guess getting back to just the business side, I mean, as an athlete, your window is so big depending on the skill level, but at some point you're still young, no matter, how long you've played, you have to move on in your career. So, how did it change? How did you get involved working for the Diamondbacks? And now it's phase 2 of your career. How do you transition from athlete to now business mindset entrepreneur?
Well, obviously baseball's in my blood. I've done it for so long. That's what I know. And, for me, I wanted to stay around the game in a certain capacity. However, I also didn't want to be so married to it anymore to where I can't get out and explore other things in my life. And this was kind of the perfect situation for me to come here and work at home with the Diamondbacks, where I work for Derek Hall, who's tremendous on just kind of letting me not only do what I want within the organization, as far as helping out in spring training, to going out and visiting some minor league clubs on the road, to helping guys here and there, to doing some community service stuff, talking to corporate sponsorship, that type of thing. It's a whole variety of different things, but it's also gives me the flexibility to where I don't have to be there every single day. I can be at home, raise my kids, be at home with my wife, and do some things like that. And then also explore some other, entrepreneurial things that I like to do on the side as well. So it's just kind of been a great fit all in all. I'm still around baseball. I still am involved with it. I'm still a part of a great organization, and yet I still get to do what I want to do on the side as well.
So what are some of the entrepreneurial things you're doing outside of still working? I know you're on furlough right now, but you're very involved in the front office there with the Diamondbacks. But what are some of the other ventures you're pursuing, at this time?
Well, I'm an avid outdoorsman. I love to hunt, love to fish. I like to golf. I'm not very good at it, but I like to get
Well,
out and
I'll,
swing
I'll
the
say this.
sticks.
There's something about baseball players. Like, I love golfing too, but every baseball player is so good at golf. And even if maybe every drive's not perfectly straight, they make great contact. I mean, there's something about that hand-eye coordination and just, it's very applicable to what, the golf career, I guess.
Yeah, but that ball doesn't move, so you'd think you'd be able to hit it straight, hit it square. But man, I can hit a pitch coming 98 miles an hour, but I can't hit a ball standing still. Strange how that works, but boy, it's a mental, mind-boggling sport for sure. But I like doing a lot of different things in the outdoor world, and so for me, when I got done playing, I wanted to create something, a venture that could kind of combine athletics and athletes along with doing something that I enjoy, that I'm passionate about in the outdoor world. And so what I did is created Elite Outdoor Adventures. It's basically a company that I don't want to call it a booking agency, but creating events in the outdoor world, intimate events, groups of 10 or 12 guys, and putting together a really fun, badass fishing trip or badass, hunting trip type thing. And bringing, and a lot of times bringing a celebrity guest along with us, whether it's a current or former baseball guy or football guy or MMA fighter or whatever it is, from the network of people that I know that, that, let's be honest, people like knowing about their career and their sport, and it gives them an opportunity to kind of dive in and find out, hey, what's it like, walking into an octagon with a dude and fighting for a world title. What's that like? I could never do that. Explain to me what that's all about. And you like to kind of hear the inside scoop of what it is. This gives people an opportunity to spend 3 or 4 days with the person and go on a fishing trip and talk shop and get intimate and get to know somebody on a personal level. So and at the same time, the number one thing is we pick a charity, and do it for a good cause and have a big charitable tail to it. So I combine those kind of 3 things, into one adventure, if you will. It's been a lot of fun. So we've had some good times.
I love that because, you think about, well, how does your Major League Baseball career, impact your career after baseball? And you've really set the tone for that. You talked about that you're, serving the community, building that network, building that Rolodex, if you will. Well, now you have, you know, players and athletes that you've met over the years from these things. And now you can even turn that into a business now after your career's done and utilize it, for the charity aspect. And so do you typically go on the excursions? Is this something you're setting up from more of a leadership standpoint and putting it together from the charitable and maybe the celebrity or athlete that's in there, or do you try to attend those as well?
Well, I usually I go on all of them, so far, but it's going to come to a point in time where I can't do all of them. I want to stay married and I want to stay at home, not get in the doghouse too much. So for me, but at least, initially going on, making sure everything's run very smoothly, and being an outdoorsman myself, I know what I like when I go on a certain trip, or things should be done a certain way. And for me to lay the groundwork with these different places that we go, like, this is how I like to do it, this is how it needs to be done. And because when people go, I want them to get off the plane and not worry about anything other than just having a great time. And then get on the plane, going home, going, wow, it was all included, everything was done to the nine, first class. And that's kind of the whole idea behind it. So in order to before I start delegating that, role of doing the making sure everything's done properly, I got to do it myself a few times. But we're getting to the point now where, I can start having some other people run the show on some of these trips, and confident they can do a good job as well. But I like going because I get to meet a lot of great people on them, and a lot of different connections that you meet on these type of trips.
Yeah, I'm sure you make a lot of good connections. And what's really important, I mean, you think of the business aspect, as I'm sure you're learning and developing now with that, the career venture you have just in the lead outdoor adventures is, there has to be systems in place, right? For you to be successful, as you mentioned, Willie can be out there and you understand, the communication and the scheduling and the protocol and, the environment you want to create to make this, a capturing experience for those that are, participating in your business. But what's really important, as you mentioned, is, okay, well, how do I start training? How do I start developing those so I don't have to be on every excursion? And then making sure that, every time you hire someone, you're almost taking a step away from your culture and you as a person, Willie. And so, how does that impact? I mean, you've had a lot of experience networking and training and all this. So how does that now work into training a staff and training people to make sure that everyone has that same experience as if you were there?
Well, I think it goes back to the fundamentals of what makes a successful business, or what makes a successful athlete or person. There's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things, and it's very cut and dry. But it's, do you want to do something 90% accurate, or do you want to do it all the way accurate? It doesn't. Those little things and little details, paying attention to little details, matter at the end of the day. Is your footwork right on a double play? Well, you might get away with it this time and the next time, but there's going to be a time where that rears its head, and you don't get the play made because your footwork was terrible. And it kind of same thing goes for business wise, where if you don't pay attention to the little things you're doing on an outdoors trip, it can backfire on you. And for me, I've learned that, obviously, as I do these, and people like things a certain way. A lot of people are very go with the flow and just happy to be there, but there's obviously those people that are kind of more high maintenance, that like things done to a T. So you might as well set that standard of doing everything accurately and right, so everything else is easy underneath that umbrella. So, for me, that's just kind of teaching the guys that that I've kind of hired to go with me on these type of things, and grooming them and teaching them, like, okay, you got to pay attention on this trip in particular. You got to pay attention to these type of things, that this is what can backfire, or if this happens, or if we have bad weather, you got to be able to adjust and still keep it fun and entertaining for people. So, those types of things, it takes some time, but they're grasping it and starting to learn how to do it.
Yeah, it's funny, now that you say this, I'm like, man, I should have had Willie on a long time ago, because I guess early in my career, especially, I look at things like, okay, I have an idea of how I need to run things and I can go do it. But then one thing that we were lacking as a company, just being transparent, especially in the early on, is we didn't have really systems, right? We didn't have protocol. We didn't have SOP, any operating procedures. And so we really didn't have systems. And I've learned over time that the more you have that, as you mentioned, the more that you're dialed in, the more communication, just like the analogy of footwork, turning a double play, that if I have these systems laid out for my team and staff, and, it allows us to be more efficient, allows us to be better communicators. It allows us to have happy clients at the end of the day, which is what you alluded to. I mean, if no matter the personality, whether they're difficult clients or easy clients, from a personality, if you have protocol and standards and communication, their guard's going to be let down and they're going to enjoy the experience. And I think that's really the key that you're selling right now.
Yeah, and that's the idea behind it, is that people get comfortable with those that are there and understand that, dude, we got everything taken care of. All you got to do is just come and enjoy yourself.
and make
and I've had
connections.
and make memories and help out a good cause. Now, if you're going to be an ass on that trip, then sorry, dude. You maybe ought to look in the mirror and maybe change yourself a little bit. And we kind of have that a little bit of that rule too, to where if somebody is that difficult, which we've never haven't come to it yet, but if somebody is that difficult, here's your money back, get the next flight home. Like, this isn't what this experience is about. It's supposed to be enjoyable, it's supposed to be fun, guys that go with the flow and have a good time, and help out a great cause. So if you're going into it with a different mindset on I'm going to try to be difficult on this trip, then probably not for you. We'll do the best we can to make everything very smooth, but at the end of the day, if we're not doing our job, that's one thing. But if you're just looking for things to be difficult, then probably not the right group of guys to be around. So haven't had that yet, knock on wood, but that's part of the protocol that we look for in inviting people on this type of trip as well.
I love that you're doing that vetting though, and it's such an important part of it. And I guess before I let you go, Willie, I have to ask this because I'm sure it's not that it's easy now, I'm sure, but I always wonder, especially Major League Baseball players, how do you balance family and life? You're playing 162 games, you're traveling 6 months, you're away from the family, away from home. And these are, you're practicing. How do you stay healthy for that long of a grueling season? And I'm sure there's some sort of balance. And now that you can apply that balance and skill set to this part of your career, where not that it's easy now doing this, but at least you've been through some tough times where now you can use that experience and really set yourself up for success. So I guess, how did you balance being on the road, staying healthy, and playing those long, grueling seasons as a professional baseball player?
Well, it's not easy. It's like anything else in life. You kind of, and we talked about it earlier, you got to prioritize, on what's important and what you want to be ultimately. So I couldn't have made it through this lifestyle without my wife, and got to give her props for being awesome and being basically a lot of times a single mom when I'm on the road and traveling around and playing. And there's a question was asked to me once: now that you're in the big leagues, is it better or worse than you imagined it to be? And I didn't have an answer for it, because there's parts of it that suck, and I know poor you, you're playing the major leagues, but there's parts of it that are not easy on a family and not easy on an athlete, from a mental standpoint. And a lot of people deal with depression and anxiety and that type of stuff as an athlete. But then, to bring that home and be able to cut that off and come home and be a happy dad, or try to be a good father and a good husband when you get home after a bad day at work or a bad day on the field, that's not always easy. And so, you learn to try to learn to balance it. And it takes a good woman to understand the mood swings and the different ups and downs that I had to deal with, going through my career. And like I said, I touched on earlier, I failed an awful lot at this game and had a lot of rough days where I'd come home and just shake my head and just want to crawl into a hole for a day or two. But you can't, you got 162 games, you got to bounce back and come at it the next day. And I think having a good family support system at home certainly helps, but certainly learning how to deal with those failures and learning how to adjust and all that stuff is not easy. How to take care of your body on the road when you're traveling, getting massage or taking care of yourself with a hot tub, cold tub, ice bath type thing, and managing that and being able to take care of yourself, staying exercise, staying healthy that way, eating healthy, all that stuff plays factors. And then on the flip side of it, now that I'm done playing, I still got to manage the same thing at home. When I get home now, I'm home all the time, and I'm used to kind of being, having an escape here and there and being on the road and once in a while. And, like I said, my wife's a saint. I don't know how she deals with all this chaos and making lunches, running kids everywhere, and ballerina costumes and all this stuff. It's a constant work in progress. But nonetheless, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
I love that. And it's funny. I love how you just brought in that, even as an athlete, yeah, there's a lot of benefits, but people don't realize you're still people. You still have families. And, something simple, I think about it where, if you're playing in New York and you're traded to California, I mean, what people don't realize, they think that's just an easy player transition, but they don't realize now your family has to move and relocate. Your kids are in school. I mean, and this can happen on the fly. You're not prepared. You have a house or a rental. And so these are things where you're uplifted as a family. In my career, I'm not just told one day, hey, Brad, you need to move to Florida tomorrow, right? And you have to adapt and figure that out and still transition. And, I think that's the one thing that I think most of us in the public don't realize, just, the sacrifices the athletes make just in the front office side as things are moved and contracts are traded and how that moves around.
Yeah, and I think now working on the other side of the equation and kind of seeing, being in a room when my friends are being talked about, we're possibly thinking about trading this guy or that guy. I'm like, oh gosh, that poor guy, and I got to keep my mouth shut because I'm not, allowed to say anything, but just going, man. But I guess one thing with the Diamondbacks that I can't speak for the other organizations, but I am very grateful to an organization that takes all that into consideration, and that understands that athletes aren't just pieces of meat. They are actually have families. They are good people. They, and there are adjustments that have to be made when you do get traded or whatever. But, they factor all that stuff in. So great organization to work for and be a part of. But yeah, from an athlete standpoint, it's those are the things that a lot of people don't see, and we don't expect them to see and understand and realize it, but that's what makes them the common fan versus the actual guy that has to deal with that and adjust with it. And that's what makes it such a just one variable that makes it such a tough career and a tough thing to be successful for a long time at.
Yeah, well, I commend you. I mean, Willie, you've led a great career. You've been a great example. You're doing a lot of charity work. I love what you're doing now. So for our listeners, how can they find you? How can they learn more about, Lead Outdoor Adventures? How can they find more out about that?
Well, like I said, I'm kind of more of an Instagram guy versus Twitter. I do have a Twitter account that's Instagram account is at Elite Outdoor Adventures. Twitter account is at Willie Bloom. Like I said, I'm not on Twitter a whole heck of a lot. I'm more of an Instagram person, just because I like to share the pictures and the videos of what we're doing. That's kind of more fun. So those are the two things. LinkedIn as well. Same thing. On there is, I think it's at Willie Bloomquist on LinkedIn. I'm not on that a whole lot either, but mostly Instagram is the best place to find what we're doing and what we're up to nowadays. So excited for the future in this venture and having a lot of fun doing it. So hopefully anyone that's listening wants to go on a fun fishing trip or hunting trip with some good dudes and have a good time and create memories, come on. So we got some good ones coming up this year and going back to Alaska, Montana, doing some things like that. So we have a lot of fun and meet some great people along the way for a good cause.
Well, thanks again, Willie. I'll make sure we put that in the show notes, and we'll tag you, of course, on Instagram, the Lead Outdoor Adventures, so they can find you. So can't thank you enough. I know you're busy with everything and family, so thanks for making time to join us today on the podcast.
Awesome, buddy. Appreciate you having me. Thanks, guys.